Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. I deliver pizza in rural Minnesota. One house made me quit my job. I used to deliver pizza for Tony's in Brainerd, Minnesota. Decent job for a college student. Flexible hours, cash tips, and most customers were pretty normal. The worst part was driving out to the rural addresses, especially in winter, but the tips were usually worth the extra gas money. This happened in late February, around 10:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was about to close up when we got a last-minute order, large pepperoni pizza, to 4847 County Road 18. The address was way out in the sticks, probably a 20-minute drive from town. I almost told my manager Jake I couldn't take it, but the customer had already paid online with a $15 tip, which was more than I had made in tips all night. County Road 18 is one of those narrow back roads that cuts through nothing but pine trees and swampland. No streetlights, no houses for miles, just forest on both sides. I'd delivered out there maybe 3 times before, always to different addresses. Always the people who seemed grateful that we drive that far. I found 4847 without too much trouble. It was a small ranch house set back from the road, with a long gravel driveway and a single porch light. The weird thing was all the other windows were dark. Usually when people order pizza, they're watching TV or have some lights on. But this place looked completely dead except for that one porch light. I grabbed the pizza bag and walked up to the front door. There was no doorbell. So I knocked and waited. After about 30 seconds, I knocked again, louder this time. That's when I heard it. Footsteps inside the house. But they sounded wrong somehow. Too heavy, and they seemed to be coming from directly above where I was standing, like someone was walking around on the roof. But that didn't make sense because it was a single-story house. The footsteps stopped, and then I heard a voice from inside say, "Just leave it by the door." The voice bothered me. It sounded muffled, like the person was talking through a blanket or from really far away, and it was deeper than I expected. The name on the order was Linda Chun, but this definitely sounded like a man. I need a signature for the credit card. I called back. That wasn't true. Online orders don't need signatures. But something felt off, and I wanted to see who I was dealing with. Silence for maybe 10 seconds. Then, "I'm not feeling well. Just leave it." I should have left the pizza and gotten out of there. That's what my gut was telling me. But I was young and stupid and didn't want to get in trouble with Jake for not following protocol. "I really need a signature," I said. "It'll just take a second." More silence. Then I heard multiple sets of footsteps inside, all walking in different directions. Like there were suddenly 4 or 5 people in there, all moving around at once. The porch light went out. I was standing in complete darkness now, holding a pizza bag, listening to what sounded like a dozen people walking around inside a house that had seemed empty 5 minutes earlier. My phone's flashlight wasn't much help. Just created this small circle of light that made everything beyond it look even darker. I started backing toward my car, but then the front door opened. I couldn't see who opened it because whoever was stayed back in the shadows, but I could hear breathing. Heavy, labored breathing, like someone who just finished running a marathon. "Come inside," the voice said. It was definitely the same voice from before, but now it sounded like it was coming from right next to my ear, even though I could tell the person was still standing in the doorway. "I'm good," I said, still backing away. "I'll just leave the pizza here." "Come inside," the voice repeated, and this time I heard it twice, once in the doorway and once from behind me. I turned around and saw a figure standing about 10 feet away, between me and my car. Same height and build as whoever was in the doorway, wearing what looked like a dark coat or jacket. In the dim light from my phone, I couldn't make out any facial features. My hand started shaking. I dropped the pizza bag and ran toward the tree line instead of my car. I figured I could circle around to the woods and get back to the road that way. I made it maybe 50 yards into the trees before I tripped over something and went down hard. When I got back up and looked around with my phone light, I realized I had tripped over another pizza bag, one of ours with Tony's logo on it. But it looked old and weathered like it had been sitting out there for months. That's when I started finding the others. There were pizza bags everywhere in those woods, dozens of them, all from Tony's, scattered between the trees like some kind of trail. Some looked recent. Others were practically falling apart. I found car keys hanging from branches, cell phones half buried in the dirt, a wallet with a driver's license from 2019. I heard voices calling my name from back toward the house. Multiple voices, but they all sounded exactly the same, like the same person talking to themselves. I ran deeper into the woods, following what looked like a deer path. My phone was at 12% battery, and I was trying to conserve it, but I needed the light to see where I was going. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, I found another road, not County Road 18, but some other rural route I didn't recognize. I followed it until I saw headlights and flagged down a pickup truck. The driver was this older guy who looked at me like I was crazy when I asked him to call the police. I was covered in dirt, bleeding from scrapes, and probably sounded insane trying to explain what happened. The cops took a report, but when they went to check 4847, County Road 18, they said the house was abandoned, had been for over 2 years, according to the county records. No power, no water, no recent activity. They found my pizza bag on the front porch, but that was it. I asked them about the other pizza bags in the woods, but they said they didn't see anything like that. They suggested maybe I'd gotten turned around in the dark and imagined some of what I saw. The next day, I went to Jake and told him I was quitting. I didn't tell him the real reason, just said I was focusing on school. But I asked him about deliveries to County Road 18, and he got this weird look on his face. "We don't deliver out there anymore," he said. "Haven't for about 3 years. Too many drivers got lost or called in saying weird things happened. Corporate finally put that whole area on the no delivery list." I asked him why nobody told me that, and he just shrugged. "Thought you knew. That address shouldn't have come through our system." I still live in Brainerd, and sometimes I drive past the turnoff for County Road 18. I've never gone back down that road, but I've talked to other people who've had jobs that require them to go out there, mail carriers, utility workers, delivery drivers for other companies. Nobody wants to talk about it directly, but I get the impression I'm not the only one who's had a bad experience in that area. The mail carrier told me there are several addresses on County Road 18 that are marked as undeliverable in their system, even though the houses supposedly exist. What bothers me most is the online order. Someone had to place it, had to pay for it with a real credit card. I asked Jake if he could look up the payment information, but he said corporate handles all the online transactions, and they don't keep local records. I still check Tony's delivery area on their website sometimes. County Road 18 is marked as outside their service zone now, just like Jake said. But every few months, I get curious and type in 4847 County Road 18 as a delivery address. Sometimes it says the address is outside the delivery area. But sometimes, and this is what really gets to me, sometimes it accepts the address and lets me add items to the cart, like the system can't decide if that place exists or not. I've never placed an order, obviously, but I wonder who would show up to deliver it if I did. Story 2. I spent every night with my dead brother on a ghost deck. I didn't want to be here. I really didn't want to. The cruise ship was supposed to be healing, according to my parents. After my brother drowned 3 weeks ago, they didn't know what else to do with me. I'd spent those weeks buried in my room, crying until my eyes were sore. So they booked me this ticket, shoved a suitcase into my hands, and told me to enjoy the ride, as if I could forget about him on a stupid cruise ship. When I was a kid, I used to love ships. I'd sit for hours on the floor with my toy cruise liner, pushing it back and forth across the carpet, imagining I'd be on one someday. My parents must have thought it was the same, like stepping onto a real ship would somehow fix me. But standing there on the deck that night, surrounded by strangers and old rich millionaires dancing and laughing, all I could feel was how empty I was. My brother would always play with me. We wanted to go on ships together. Doing it alone felt like a betrayal. I stayed near the railing, gripping the cold steel with my hands, staring out at the sea. Beautiful, I thought to myself. For a moment, I thought maybe my parents were right. Maybe this really could help me. Then I remembered. It was the same water that swallowed my brother whole. The thought destroyed me. Whatever peace I had felt drained away. No one else noticed, of course. The music was too loud. People were too drunk, and I couldn't even talk to anyone. Why would they send me here? I wanted to grieve by myself. I didn't need this. I turned around, ready to go to my cabin and sleep until the whole cruise was over. But on my way there, I must have gotten lost. I found something else. There was a narrow corridor, tucked behind a stack of unused deck chairs. At the end, a simple steel door with a round window. There were no cameras recording this place. I also didn't see a sign on the door, which would indicate it's for staff only. I'm not sure why I opened it. Maybe I craved the quiet. I want to be alone, I'm not sure. The air was different when I stepped through. It was colder than outside. I turned back, thinking it was a bad idea. Too late. The door was already gone. And ahead of me was a deck I'd never seen before. It was quiet. There were no lights or music. Just moonlight guiding me forward. But it didn't calm me. It made me anxious. Where was I? This place looked different to the rest of the ship. The deck was painted in a different color. The length of the deck was too long. It physically did not fit in with the ship. Lily? My heart stopped. He was leaning against the railing, his back facing me, the way he always used to when we went to the beach. Daniel? My voice cracked, but I didn't care. He turned, and there he was, my brother. He didn't look dead. In fact, he looked very much alive. Not the way I'd pictured him at the bottom of the ocean. He even smiled at me like he always used to. You. I couldn't even breathe. I ran to him and wrapped my arms around him. And he hugged me back. It felt so real. I missed you, he whispered. I sobbed into his chest, my arms clinging to him. But you're dead. I know. He said it so casually, I almost forgot what he even said. But not here. I pulled back, trying to get my bearings. Where is here? He glanced out at the water and took a second before answering. Here, it's better than out there. It's calmer. There's no one to disturb us. And we can talk about anything. Our dreams, goals, anything. Something in the way he said it should have scared me, but it didn't. Finally, for the first time in weeks, I was happy. Overjoyed, really. You don't have to leave, Lily, Daniel said. Stay. It's better if you stay. I nodded without even realizing it. It just felt right. While outside, everything was wrong. He looked me in my eyes. But tonight, you're tired. Come back tomorrow. I'll be waiting for you. I don't even remember walking back to my cabin afterward. One second I was there with Daniel, and the next I was lying in bed. And for the first time since he died, my nightmare subsided. The next night, I went back. I told myself I wouldn't, that it was just grief playing tricks on me. I've read about this online. But when the ship's lights dimmed and everything was quieter, I found myself unable to resist. And he was there. He was always there for me. Just like before, we talked for hours about the dumb movies we used to watch, the fights we had, the summer we built a raft out of wood, and nearly drowned in the lake next to our town. It felt like nothing had changed. And every night, I felt lighter. I stopped showing up to dinners my parents had prepaid for. I stopped going to their relaxation activities they had booked. I knew they'd get a call about it, but I didn't care. I only wanted to be with my brother. By the fourth night, I wasn't even trying to hide it. I stayed until dawn. Somewhere around day 6, I caught my reflection in one of the glass panels on the deck. I looked tired, pale and so tired. Like these conversations were sucking the life out of me. Don't worry about it, Daniel said, putting a hand on my shoulder. You're all right. Why not just sleep here? I almost said yes, but I knew I shouldn't. I just had a gut feeling it was better if I go back to my cabin to sleep. By day 8, even the other passengers started to notice me. I'd feel their eyes on me when I passed through the dining hall. Some looked worried, others were disturbed. But I didn't care. I waited for nightfall. I was always scared to sneak away during the day. Daniel was always waiting for me with a smile on his face. There was always a new subject we could talk about. Like years passed, and we had so much to catch up on. I honestly couldn't and still can't explain how he was there with me. But being a religious person, I believed it was a miracle. I didn't question it really. I enjoyed it because I knew it couldn't last forever. The cruise would end soon. And when I told him about the cruise ending, he didn't answer. He looked away, then back at me with a smile. Then, "Don't leave." I laughed it off. After all, we both know that's not possible. I have responsibilities back home. I just got into college and finally managed to take up a part-time job. "Yeah, sure," I said. "I'll just live on a cruise ship forever." But Daniel didn't laugh. He kept looking at me, serious. "I'm not joking, Lily," he said. "You don't have to go back. You don't have to feel the pain every day. You could just stay here with me. Wouldn't that be easier?" A chill ran down my spine. I didn't know what to do. I stared at him, my mouth agape. I stood up and backed toward the door. Sorry, I really can't." I muttered. Daniel's expression softened. "That was too direct, I'm sorry," he said gently. "At least visit me once more before you leave. Just one last night. Please." I hesitated. Something in my mind told me to run and never come back. But then he smiled my brother's smile, and I felt myself gnawed. The next day, I had a lot of time to think. Think about him, about my life, about the cruise. I cried, again, but this time not from sadness, but desperation. I didn't know what to do. Nighttime came faster than before. I should have been packing my things or watching the closing ceremony. Instead, I found myself walking the same hidden corridor. I opened the door, and Daniel was waiting. "Hey, Lily," he said, grinning like always. "I'm glad you came." "Yeah," I whispered one last time. He didn't respond to that. He just turned and started walking down the deck, and I followed. But it looked different this time around. The sky was darker, and the water below wasn't calm. It moved violently, waves crashing against the hull. Outside, in the real world, there was no such thing. "Daniel, what is this?" I asked. He smiled, then looked down at his feet. "It's just us now. We both know this is what you want. There's nothing to hurt you here." I turned around, ready to leave, but the door disappeared in front of my eyes. "Please, Lily, listen to me," he begged. "It hurts, doesn't it? I'm also hurting. Every single day without you is hell. I can't even believe what you're feeling. This way we can both be happy." My brother, my real brother, would never say that. He would never place his needs above mine. He was too selfless to do that. He knew I had a life to go back to, but now he's only thinking of himself. This wasn't him. "Daniel, stop." I ordered. "You're not him." He wouldn't do this to me. His smile faded, his hand twitched, and the whole deck changed. The sky above gave way to rain. Water poured all over the deck from nowhere. The ship groaned and tilted under my feet, and suddenly I was in my brother's room. The day after he died. His bed was unmade, clothes piled in the corner, his photo on the nightstand. Daniel was standing there too. He looked hurt. "You're really going to leave me? After everything? After I came back for you?" The walls trembled as I stumbled backward, searching for an exit that wasn't there. "Please, stop this already." I whispered. He stepped closer. His face was twisted. I could notice sadness, anger, and guilt on it. "If you go," his voice cracked. "If you go, you'll forget me. I'll be gone forever." I shook my head. "No, I'll remember you. The real you. The Daniel I loved and grew up with. Not this hollow version of him." And for the first time, he looked scared. The room spun around, but we stayed in place, like gravity didn't affect us. What can I do to be more like him? He asked, a tear rolling down his face. I didn't know what to say. The sight of my brother crying broke me. I wanted to hug him, to hold him and tell him everything will be all right. But this wasn't him. He's dead. I finally accepted it. You can't, I answered bluntly. He's gone, and there's nothing you or I can do about that. The door reappeared behind me, and I ran through it. He called after me, his voice warping into a deep and cold one. Lily, don't. I slammed through the door, and just like that, I was back in the narrow corridor. The cold air and rain were gone. Without looking back, I started walking forward, away from the door, each step faster than the last. That night, I didn't sleep much. I stayed in my cabin, clutching my brother's old bracelet like my life depended on it. The next morning, the ship docked. When I got off, I looked back at the corridor one last time, half expecting him to be there and wave at me. But the corridor wasn't there, it disappeared. I stood there for a long time, staring at empty steel, replaying all the memories in my head. And even now, weeks later, I still dream of that deck sometimes. The question now wasn't whether it was real, because I'm sure it was. The question now is whether I made the right decision. Story 3. How planning a wedding almost ended my life. I'm a wedding planner, and I am good at my job. If a client wants something, I go above and beyond. I get them what they want, especially big clients. And Miss Laura was a big client. Her family had wealth that went back to the first colonies, and it didn't look like they'd lost any in the intervening 400 years. I remember touching up my lipstick in the vanity mirror above the driver's seat and thinking to myself that this was it. I was on the cusp of 40, and I was about to break into the event planning upper echelon of 1% of weddings. It would be Miss Laura's wedding, but it would be my coronation. Sweet little Laura ushered me into her home, and we spoke at length. Her expectations were very reasonable, and she knew what she was talking about. A life of debutante balls and campaign fundraisers and 500-person Christmas parties was a curriculum she learned from. There was only one thing that Laura wanted that no other wedding planner said they could get. I want the woman who lives in the House of Pounds. I furrowed my brow. Maybe Laura wasn't as reasonable as I thought she was. Why? The crone? Why on earth do you want her there? Because she's my great aunt on my father's side, Laura said. That was news to me. I didn't know anyone who'd even met the infamous crone from the House of Pounds. And here was Laura claiming the old, which was family. May I ask why you or your father don't invite her yourselves? She pushed down on the hem of her skirt at her knees, and her smile faltered. You know why they call it the House of Pounds, don't you? Of course I knew. Everybody in town knew. But I lied. I don't pay attention to that sort of thing. But you know, Laura added more bite to her voice. I'll bet you even know the words. I involuntarily scanned for escape routes. What words? Say them, Laura said. Say the words, or I will find someone else to plan my wedding. Women from inherited wealth have the luxury of following through with threats. Laura had been kind and gracious to me, but she also expected me to dance to her tune. So I said the words. Welcome to the House of Pounds, where all are given just one round. First penalty is a pound of flesh, but try again, she'll take the rest. Do you know what it means? She said. This was like pulling teeth. I did not want to have this conversation, but I answered. I have an idea. Laura looked behind me, behind herself, and all around the room. I was a well-socialized woman. I knew she was about to tell me a secret. I was half right. She didn't tell me the secret, but she showed it to me. She hiked her skirt up all the way to her waist so I could see her panties, whole thighs and buttocks. Laura's flesh was missing, a pound's worth, if I had to guess. From inside her thigh, right below her perineum. I shuddered. Laura's face reddened. She pulled her skirt back down before looking away. I thought I saw the glimmer of a tear welling in one of her eyes. She wiped her face. You see, I can't go back. I've given my pound of flesh. If I go again, she'll take the rest, I said. Laura nodded. Exactly. I have to tell you, I didn't see what the big deal was once I parked in the driveway and saw it up close. The House of Pounds was nothing more than a shabby example of Gothic revival architecture, an old money homestead that had faded along with the blue in the family's blood. If I had to guess, I'd say she was probably a hoarder and cat lady. I highly doubted she deserved a reputation as an evilly mystical witch. I walked up and knocked on the door. It opened before I could knock twice. A little girl who couldn't have been older than 6 stood there in a traditional Victorian maid's outfit. "Please come in," she said. "She is expecting you." The grade school chambermaid indicated for me to walk down the main hallway. She used her thumb to point the way because the hand she pointed with had its 4 other fingers missing. This was the creepiest way I'd ever been welcomed into someone's home. But in for a penny, in for a pound. I laughed a laugh specific to my humming nerves and pun of thoughts. I walked down the hallway until I saw another grade school chambermaid. She stood next to an open door through which I saw a room shadowed pitch black. This little girl was missing both of her hands. Have you ever seen a child missing a body part, let alone several? It's not just upsetting. It cores you like an apple. The closest I'd ever felt to that coring was after waking from a recurrent nightmare about my mother being torn apart by Rottweilers and thinking she might really have been mauled. My bowels felt stuffed full of lead shot and detached from my intestines. "Hello," I said, eyeing the girl's missing hands. "Are you okay?" She whispered like she was afraid someone was listening. "I have a secret to tell you." She waved one of her stumps inward. I leaned close to her and turned my ear toward her lips. I heard a man's voice say, "In for a penny, in for a pound." I turned and saw a 6-foot ghoul dressed in the same Victorian-made outfit as the 2 little girls. I screamed and turned to run, but he wrapped one of his long limbs over me from behind, pinning my arms to my body and my body to his. He covered my mouth and whispered, "Chill, chill, chill. Quiet now, quiet now." I cried into his hand. "You're here to meet her, aren't you?" he said. He removed his hand so I could speak, but I couldn't. I was out of my wits with fear. "Answer me, or I'll make a pair of mittens from the flesh I cut out of your belly." I sobbed and hurriedly nodded my head. "Use your words like a big girl," he said. "Yes," I said through my tears, my body shaking almost like I was having a seizure. "Yes, I'm here to meet her." He let go from behind me, and I heard him step back and away. I turned to face him, but there was no him there. It was only the grade school chambermaid. Then, by all means, the little girl shoved me into the darkness through the open door behind my back. I went tumbling down a 45-degree angled chute. I heard inhuman voices, what might have been 50 monsters' voices, roaring and screeching at me. They called me terrible names, nonsensical names, cruelly true names: Shy-Teeter, Starfucker, Mother of Excrement, Beef Stew, Thin-Lipped Spinster, Drunk Driver. And with every insult, I felt a sharp, hot, wet pain somewhere in my body, like 10-penny nails being hammered into my stomach, my spine, between my toes and fingers, and the soft flesh between my genitalia and anus. The pain felt like every hurt I'd ever felt puncturing my flesh again all at once. I screamed and cried as I tumbled down the chute. It spat me out onto a basement's dirt floor. A single hanging light bulb shone over the dusty ground. I put my hands out in front of me and saw blood run in rivulets down my arms. My blood went through my fingers and soaked into the dirt. I hung my head between my biceps. How was I going to escape? She stepped into the light, far enough to silhouette her face but not show it. I wasn't looking at her directly, but through my peripheral vision, I thought if I looked up, I would see the face of 100 monsters, see malformed lips defame and degrade me. "Look at me," she said. I shook my head no, watching my blood dribble. From behind her, I heard the low, ticking rumble of a crocodile. Then I heard 2, then 3, then 100 reptilian groans bellowing at once, threatening to rupture my eardrums. I screamed, "Okay." The crocodilian bellows stopped. I looked up. I saw a woman in a widow's black mourning dress. It covered her arms up to her wrists and her neck up to her chin. Her face was obscured by a lace black mourning veil. But even through the veil, I could see outlines of missing pieces. A quarter of a lip gone, half of one ear, a dry and angry eyeball glaring through where an eyelid used to be. "Why are you here?" she said. "Why do any of you come when you already know the words?" "I'm here because of a wedding." "Who are you marrying?" she asked. "Not my wedding, someone else's." She laughed low in her throat. A pound of flesh for someone else's betrothal. It sounds rather like the Merchant of Venice. The Merchant of Venice. The Merchant of Venice, I thought to myself, remembering long-forgotten English classes, stories I hadn't thought of in years. Bargain. I screamed it out. I screamed it out again. Bargain. I stood up, my pulse pushing blood from my wounds till my clothes were soaked crimson. I assert my right to bargain. I will surrender my pound of flesh, but only with consideration. I demand a contract for the exchange. I saw the ghost of a wretched smile through her veil. I never thought I would hear it. If you assert your right to bargain, I am not one to refuse. I presume you offer up your pound of flesh? I found power waiting in my voice. I offer up a pound of flesh as payment on a bargain. And what would you bargain for in exchange for a pound of flesh? Do you know a woman named Laura? I asked, adding the family's last name. I do. And she is your grandniece? The crone frowned. She is. I offer my pound of flesh in exchange for your promise to attend her upcoming wedding. She was quiet for what seemed like a very long time. She finally said, "Very well, so you accept fair terms in a villain's mind. Come, then, we'll draw up the bargain, in either blood, ink, or both." Laura's wedding was a spectacular success. The crone attended, as she was contractually obligated to attend. It gave Laura great cash, and it made my reputation. Business poured in. I wasn't just planning weddings. I was bargaining for the impossible on behalf of wealthy clients. And I was paid very, very well to do it. And anyway, by the time Laura was married, the stump where my hand used to be had healed. Mostly. Story 4. 1,000 faces, 1,000 voices. When I was a child, my family moved a lot. I never finished a whole school year in the same town I started in. There was one summer that I will never forget as long as I live. The summer I spent in Greenville. We moved to Greenville to sort out my late grandfather's estate. The school year had just finished, so my little brother James and I had the whole summer to get to know the other kids before the school year started, a luxury we were not commonly afforded. I'd never really had a friend before that summer. I didn't see the point, since we would be leaving in a few months anyway. But Dad had assured us that we would be staying here for a whole year. I figured I could give the whole friend thing a go. That's when I met Braden, my next-door neighbor. He was 11. So was I, and we both liked playing in the woods. He was my first real friend, and I wish every day that he had never had the misfortune of meeting me. I was tagging along with Braden's family to the convenience store one day when his brother, an older boy named Justin, started talking. They say there's a monster in the woods out past the old church. Justin told us, gesturing to the derelict, overgrown building. They say if you ask a question, it'll answer, no matter what you ask, but it takes something in return. Stop trying to scare them. Braden's mom cut Justin off. I'm trying to warn them, he replied in an exaggerated, spooky voice. When we got back to Braden's place, we rushed to his bedroom to make our plans for that night. I asked my mom if I could stay at Braden's place. She said yes, and I packed my bag to stay over. We were going to hunt that monster. We packed snacks, a flashlight, Braden's baseball bat, and some of James's chalk for marking a path in the woods. The clock in Braden's room didn't work, so we just waited until a few hours after dark to sneak out the window. We made our way around to the side of the house where we had stashed our bikes earlier that day and pedaled off into the night. We parked our bikes at the back of the old church and began to make our way into the woods. "What are you going to ask?" I whispered, elbowing him gently. "I know, what are you going to ask?" he replied. We spent the rest of that hour or so trying to decide what questions to ask. I don't remember what we eventually settled on, but whatever was had no impact on the events that followed. After a good while of walking through the woods, marking trees with chalk as we went, we saw a light in the woods ahead. We crouched down but kept approaching to see if we could figure out what it was. When we were close enough to see who it was, I was shocked to see my grandfather standing there with a lantern in his hand. "Granddad, is that you?" I called to the elderly man. "No," came a reply a second later, in my voice. "Dude, that was your voice." "What is that thing?" Braden whispered to me. Then came a reply in my voice again. "I am known by many names. I am that which people of days long gone feared. I am the one that dwells outside of firelight. I am the one who watches nations rise and fall. I am the origin of fear and the end of reason. I have been here since time began. I will witness the end." At that, the old man collapsed to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. Braden turned to me and spoke in my voice. "You have no further business here. Return to your home now." He reached out his hand to touch my forehead. The instant his skin touched mine, he vanished, along with our only flashlight. "Run home, child. Your mother will worry if you're gone too long," came my voice from the woods surrounding me. I ran as fast as I could, but running through the woods at night is difficult in the best of circumstances. And this was hardly the best of circumstances. As I stumbled through the dark, I began to hear laughter in the tree line. The laughter moved all around me. Between the trees, I saw glimmers of light. I ran, my feet pounding against the ground, often stumbling over roots and branches. The clouds had cleared a little, which gave me just enough light to avoid the bigger roots. Ahead of me through the trees, I could just see the old church under a flickering streetlight. I was almost out of the woods. The footsteps and laughter were right on my heels. I could feel hot breath on the back of my neck as I burst through the tree line. All the sound stopped at once. I turned to look back and saw the light retreating back into the woods. I picked up my bike and made my way back home. My family had locked all the doors and windows, so I snuck back into Braden's room through the open window we had used just a few hours earlier. The following day, Braden's mother asked where Braden was. I tried to tell her, but the words simply wouldn't come out. The whole town banded together to search the woods, but no trace of him was ever found. In the days that followed, I spent almost every spare minute I had retracing our path through the woods. I followed the chalk marks right up until a storm washed them off the trees. And even then, I kept looking. I knew Braden was gone, but I thought maybe I could find a thing that took him. I never did. Braden's family never looked at me the same after that day. I could tell his parents blamed me. They didn't want me to know, but I could tell. Justin outright refused to talk to me. I think he thought I did something. I guess he wasn't that far off. My family packed up and left Greenville about a month after the official search was called off, though Braden's family kept looking. After several doctors, psychiatrists, and speech therapists, I eventually came to terms with my muteness. My family still doesn't believe me, but I don't blame them. It's difficult to believe when they still hear my voice from the woods when we go camping, and from dark corners when the power goes out. If ever you find yourself in Greenville, beware the thing in the woods. It may offer secret knowledge and truths untold, but when you leave, the voice it speaks with is yours, and in your dreams, the face it wears is your own. Story 5. It wasn't the weed. I don't like my friend's apartment. For someone so colorful and lively, there's a heavy stillness that weighs the place down. It gets very little natural light despite having windows that face the central courtyard. 2 walls in the living room are painted black, meeting at the corner where her gray sectional is tucked in. There's a lamp or two, but they only emit a dim glow, even with fresh light bulbs. When a few of us have been over to hang, the vibe seems to dampen everyone's mood by the time we leave. She once told me that a little girl had been murdered in the complex in the 70s by the father, and that the building manager alluded that it happened in her very apartment. So I always chalked up the feeling to that. Whether or not you believe in ghosts or anything of the sort, you can't deny the creepiness of a murder scene. I'd known she hadn't been feeling well, so I wasn't surprised when our mutual friend suggested that we drop by with drinks and snacks to cheer her up. The entire time I'd known her, she'd had a variety of ailments, from toothaches to ear infections to pulled back muscles and bruises she couldn't explain. Her not feeling well was nothing new. Of course, I agreed. Unusually, I was the first to arrive, managing to snag a parking spot across the street. The entry to the building has those mid-century style cement blocks and enormous glass doors with the courtyard just beyond. A woman stood in front of the glass. It was rare to see one of the neighbors. The building was pretty quiet, and it seemed like everyone kept to themselves. She was muttering to herself and stared when she noticed me approaching. Her dark hair was pulled back in a stringy bun, and her eyes were sallow and sunken. It was hard to tell if she was older or younger than me, only that life had been harsh. There are plenty of mentally ill people in the city. Hell, I'm one of them. So I smiled, and it spurred her to punch in the code and open the door for me. But she only pushed it open slightly, situated herself against it so my chest grazed hers as I squeezed past, staring at me the entire time. My "excuse me" didn't seem to have any effect. She followed me in, and I could feel her eyes on my back as I rounded the corner to my friend's ground floor unit. I knocked once, and my friend ripped the door open, as if she'd been waiting for me on the other side. She quickly ushered me in, and when she closed the door, I mentioned the woman. My friend is striking, with beautiful large eyes that everyone seems to get lost in, but I'd never seen them get so big, the whites fully exposed like a panic horse. They were made all the more unsettling by the uncomfortable smile tightly stretched across her chapped lips. Her voice dropped to the barest whisper, and I had to lean in to hear her say, "That woman is trying to kill me." She went on to explain a series of bizarre occurrences with this neighbor from the last 9 years, long before I knew her, and I listened with a growing sense of alarm. She'd never mentioned this neighbor before, and I'd never seen her until that day. The woman lived in the apartment directly above her and constantly accused my friend of playing loud music and rearranging her furniture at all hours of the night, banging on her floor in retaliation. She claimed she could hear all her conversations, whether on the phone or with friends or lovers who came over. She always emerged when my friend left her apartment, gripping the rail and leaning over dangerously to watch her go. She'd gone to the building manager and the police, insisting that my friend's previous roommate was stalking her, despite him being his boyfriend's more often than home and never having spoken to her. She would scream for an unseen black car across the street to leave her alone, often involving the cops in that too. My friend confessed she suspected this neighbor was going through her trash, having noticed her following with her own bags whenever she took garbage to the dumpster out back. She didn't even know the woman's name. Any early attempt to be friendly had been met with intense, disconcerting stares and silence. She only referred to her as 2A. I think she's schizophrenic or something. She finished wanly, only half joking. I told her she needed a gun. Our other friend arrived shortly after. She didn't bring up the neighbor, only that we had to keep it down. We played music videos on the TV at a low volume and settled in with our drinks and snacks. I brought over a nice joint to share, and her mood slowly relaxed, the cheer in her voice picking up again. She sat in the corner of her couch. It was her usual spot. As we passed the joint around, she updated us on her life. She'd been having headaches recently and was passed over for a promised promotion at work. Her situationship ended poorly with a minor STI. There was a falling out with a friend who'd suddenly turned cold. Her car was having issues, and she couldn't afford the quote from the mechanic. We offered our sympathies, validating her feelings, and speculating if there was something going on with the planets. Through it all, that heavy stillness settled on my shoulders and wrapped around my head. I focused on being present to the haze of smoke. The joint was a hybrid, and distantly I chided myself for not bringing an upbeat sativa. I felt the familiar pressure on my eyes and the center of my face. It was only that, I assured myself, don't be weird. When our drinks needed to be refreshed, the three of us headed to the stark white kitchen, lit by a hideous overhead fluorescent light. Trepidation crept over my scalp, spreading through my nervous system as I picked another flavor of hard seltzer. Don't be weird, I reminded myself. Don't be fucking weird. But then my eyes were drawn to that one dark corner. The layout of the apartment allows a long, clear view to the living room from the kitchen. My vision tunneled as it lengthened and stretched both near and far. I couldn't hear whatever my friends were talking about, and they were equally oblivious to what I was experiencing. The corner grew darker and darker. It mushroomed to the ceiling, and I watched as my friends went back to the couch. As she took her usual seat in that open mall black, my entire body froze with a primal sense of danger, skin clammy with my heart in my throat. My father died when I was a teenager. He's been dead for a long time, but his voice rang out in my head, clear as day, run. Now, I've been stoned to high heaven plenty of times in my life. You could call me a professional. It's never given me auditory hallucinations or any sense of paranoia. I'm the only one in my friend group who does not have some form of social or clinical anxiety. I'm the one who's calm in the face of fear. I'm the one who's steady in emergencies. I've never felt this type of dread before, and I hope to never experience it again. Guilt stayed me from leaving immediately. I returned to my chair, chiming in only occasionally as I tried to quickly finish my drink with all the subtlety I could muster. I looked at my friends, again trying to be present. Once more, my gaze pulled to the darkness in the corner, blacker than pitch, blacker than the emptiness of space. This time, it was my grandmother's voice I heard, and she screamed, "Run." I remember bolting up and making some excuse about an early morning. Our mutual friend took that moment to also announce it was time for her to depart. I saw a flicker of desperation in my friend's doe eyes, a brief wildness that edged on hysteria. But then it was gone, and she was wishing us safe drives home. She walked us to the door, and I was grateful that neighbor was nowhere to be seen. We promised to text to confirm our arrivals unscathed, and made our way out of the building. Our friend had parked just behind me, and as we walked to our cars, I managed to keep my voice light as I asked, "Did you feel anything weird in there?" She rolled her eyes with a long, suffering sigh. "It's so depressing. I wish she'd open a window, and maybe paint the walls a jewel tone if she wants the drama. The black is oppressive. Did you feel anything else?" I hedged, still uneasy despite being outside. She gave me an odd look. "Did you?" I described my sense of dread and the weird interaction I had with a neighbor when coming in. I left out hearing my father and grandmother's warning. Her lips pursed slightly, but her tone was gentle. "I think you smoked a little too much. Are you sure you're okay to drive?" I hid my dismay behind a close-lipped smile and assured her I was fine. As I sped to my neighborhood, I called my roommate and asked her to bring out the rock salt for my arrival. I didn't want to cross the threshold of the house without a cleansing. I didn't want to bring that darkness home. I'm ashamed to admit I cried during the drive. My roommate met me out front without question. I took fistfuls of salt and rubbed the rough granules over my arms and chest, down my torso to my legs. I poured it over my head, not caring that it caught in my hair, and made sure to scrub my face and neck, even my armpits. I threw salt in my car. I walked around it casting salt at the exterior. As I came around the back, I spied a faint black handprint with fingers too long and too few, and a palm too wide, clinging to the bumper. It was smeared, as if the car took off too fast to get a firm grip. I refused to go back. When she asked to make plans, I suggest public locations or our other friends will offer to host. Each time I see her, she looks weaker. She doesn't mention the neighbor. I don't mention her either. But when our eyes meet, I see an understanding there, both a haunting accusation and acceptance. She knows I know, and I feel worse for it. Story 6. An Ode to the 65. Recently, I moved house. I left a terrible house, neglectful landlord and extortionate rent. It was the epitome of the London experience. I was treated to silverfish, disgusting bugs that I saw more often than my housemates, and a broken heating system that nearly led to me succumbing to an electrical fire after my landlords gave me a faulty heater. I hated it. Why did I spend 2 years of my precious existence in a place that pushed me to connect with the spiders in my room? They were the only effective form of pest control. After all, I was kept there by what existed around my house. The green, leafy suburbia of West London, the emerald in its crown, molded and shaped by the serpentine River Thames that placed me in the English countryside of my youth more so than the city I had hoped to love. Along its banks, charming settlements like Richmond, Barnes, Ham, and Twickenham held me close in an embrace of middle-class superiority. I remember so vividly being surrounded by my friends of the Dove and Hammersmith, a Pimm's in my hand, looking across the most gorgeous view of the Thames, basking in the silhouettes of distant bridges. This was my home, even if where I slept was not. I lived right on the border between Hounslow and Ealing, just on the cusp of Gunnersbury Park, and from the staging post I was able to connect into charming restaurants, the Royal Botanical Gardens, quaint bookshops, and my favorite pub quiz at the Shaftesbury. Given my team the deviously named, we put the shaft in Shaftesbury. People would, as polite society is wont to do, ask me, "Adam, where do you live?" I would lie, knowing that South Ealing wasn't really a place, but a series of houses built around a tube station, and respond with any of the much sexier options at Kew Bridge, Chiswick, or the especially egregious Greater Richmond. Now, connectivity between the southwest of London and west of London is a difficult one for those who love the luxury of a stuffy tube service. The trains go towards the center and then back on themselves. This journey of Ealing to Richmond and Kingston is a path only trodden by cars and the iconic symbol of London, the double-decker red bus. The 65 bus is a route that connects Ealing Broadway and Kingston, and I only just realized how much this service, one that celebrated its centenary of existence last year, has seen my life grow. It also happens to be the favorite bus route of the incumbent rail minister, Lord Hendy of Richmond Hill. I first met the 65, traveling to Cheam, the home of my ex-girlfriend. I did not think much of this service when I first boarded at Chalice Road. Beyond the near constant stop-starting across its route, the only memory I had taken away was the existence of a large elephant bush sculpture somewhere near Ham. On this inaugural journey, I saw the full length of what it had to offer, going deeper into the heart of suburbia before changing at Kingston bus station to get the much more recognizable Superloop service. I probably, in that moment, thought more about the Five Guys that I bought a milkshake from than I did the means of arriving. Fast forward nearly 2 years, and it would be the very same service I had to take, simply in reverse, when I broke up with her. The N65, its edgier nighttime twin, was an oasis from drunken, stumbling nights in central London. My desire for alcohol and the company of long-lost friends held me fixed to a pub or club as the last tube came rolling through nearby stations. Despite the more colorful characters that would populate these late services, it watched me evolve from someone who gagged at the smell of wine to the slightly late blooming adult I am still to this day. After the first holiday with my now girlfriend Edinburgh, one in which I think we truly fell in love with one another, the 65 carried us back home. I remember this journey because we had missed our last tube, and Ubers were being expectedly unreliable. I was stressed, a level of anxiety took over me, as I worried if we'd ever make it home at a reasonable time, and she calmed me down on that bus while we listened to my favorite audio drama, forgetting to observe a side of myself that I would rather have kept hidden. To say that the 65 has been an unintentional passenger in my life would be an understatement. Beyond the house I despised, it was the only other constant across those 2 years. It was an artery that I clung to as a catalyst for solace, a vital vein that connected me to one of my coping mechanisms, the not-so-hidden gems of southwest London. The Kew to Richmond towpath, my truest home. This riverside walk was the go-to cure for my woes and ills. Whenever I felt bored, exhausted, anxious, sad, happy, or lonely, I would put on my shoes, embark upon the 65 to carry me to Kew, load up on snacks at the Tesco Express, and loop from Kew to Richmond and back again by foot. This journey would take me about 3 hours, and I would do it nearly every single day. Running parallel to Kew Gardens, I was able to look upon vast 19th century feats of architecture, intertwining forests and rowers cutting through the water. The beauty of its sights is genuinely unparalleled to any other London walk that I've experienced. I miss it. In August 2023, I had grown used to the bright evenings of summer, those where the sun would set a couple hours before midnight. This was my favorite time to walk. I would embrace the dull evening warmth, so much cooler than the blaring sun of hours prior, and engage with my daily ritual, a podcast blaring in my ears, and eyes setting upon sights of constant repetition, but those that still filled me with the same wonder of the very first time. Yet with familiarity emerges complacency, and I had become a fool, for some reason, loss of memories burned from my mind. I had decided to leave my house far later than usual and start my walk in reverse, striding upon Q Road into Richmond rather than starting from the towpath. I had never tried to walk the towpath in the dark. I had no memories of streetlights that could have aided my journey. I didn't reflect once on the memories of walking along Q Bridge in the late hours of prior evenings, moments where I went, yeah, that's dark, as I looked out at what would have been the route I was about to take, yet with my brain switched off, listening to some amateurly written horror stories, doing something that I had done close to 100 times before. I simply did not think that it would be a problem. The walk started as familiar as ever, and some streetlights dotted upon the banks of Thames began to illuminate as I started my journey towards Q, serving as a false hope to my idling brain that the rest of it would be similarly bright. While the sun was still visible, it had sunken low and cast an orange glow across the horizon. Slowly, as my footsteps echoed along a road of dwindling people, it transformed into a muted dark blue. It became apparent to me far too late that I was the only person for her as far as I could see. For a journey I had taken so many times before, an ill familiarity took a hold of me as the natural glow of the fading sun tried hard to pierce through the trees, but failed, making everything just slightly different. Bushes felt larger, their shadows consuming the path. The branches from the trees jutted out to create a canopy that once felt like a hug from nature, but now felt intentional, holding me tight. The towns and villages on the other side of the Thames were now silhouettes, faint lights from tired occupants slowly extinguishing as I pressed on. I took too many steps before I realized that I could no longer see far ahead, relying upon the occasional break in the tree line for a faint outline of where I would need to travel to next. Leaves that were once individually perceptible formed a mass of darkness, and the stones beneath my feet curved in ways that felt like they pierced the sole of my shoes. There came a moment where I began to lower the volume of my podcast. The horror stories that would once fill my mind with creativity suddenly felt far too real, and I had chosen to switch to an upbeat soundtrack to force my brain out of a state of fear. It was as I paused the podcast that I had noticed it was the only sound. I took one step forward, and the crunch of matter below my feet echoed through my surroundings. The call of birds and faint laughter from pub side chats were gone. It did not matter how recently I had remembered them being present. They were nowhere, and so was I. The wind did now blow. I was the sole source of disturbance. Noise did not return. I began to panic as I frantically turned my phone's torch on to scan the route ahead of me, tracing myself along Google Maps to see if I should just pivot and turn back rather than face the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Unfortunately, I had ventured too deep. It would take me the same amount of time to get closer to home than it would to get back to Richmond. The choice had been made for me. Using the torch, I aimed it ahead to check every inch of woodland and greenery for something that lay dormant, ready to find me in my isolation. It was then that I had noticed a cast iron bench, where before the darkness created new shapes out of the land that I knew had always been there. This was something completely new. While benches were not uncommon, this looked rusted with age and far too uncomfortable for any normal person to use it. The back of the bench curved high. If I had sat down, it would have surged past my head by a few inches. It was wide and gently bent towards me. I looked below. The moss-covered bolts that presumably kept it pinned to the ground were unscrewed and discarded along the floor. As I began to bend down and pick one up, the darkness expanded and enveloped the floor. In a blink of horrified reaction, the darkness was gone, but so were the bolts, now tightened hard into the bench. My head throbbed. I stepped back and saw the bench's shadow grow. My mind was drawn to an ornate sheet of metal, but this plaque was empty. No dedications or, in loving memory, were printed out, just a faint outline of what I thought was my name. I did not look back as I left the bench behind. The sun was gone. In the faint outline of moonlight, a tree lay ahead. Its bark ran high, the tree merging into a mass of forestry that meant I saw no end, nor did I see where it began. For orifices from the bark looked upon what I had hoped was the Thames. I took a photo to send to my girlfriend, my terrified messages laying unread. My signal had disappeared. The tree began to shift towards me and sang. I looked at Google Maps, desperate for the solace of knowing I was nearly there. It could not find me. I sprinted beyond the tree, its cacophony filling the air in a warped, slowed rhythm that felt like a melted record. I did not stop, catching my balance as the path began to decline and ascend, twisting and curving across itself. The further I ran, the more the horizon disappeared, the stars above fading into black of night. I screamed, but nothing came out of my empty lungs. I searched across the river for a reminder where I was, but crooked shapes amassed around unfamiliar structures. When I finally reached what I thought was Q Bridge, my phone clinging to 1%, it wasn't. It was a bridge. Yes, but not the one I knew. Older, built of black brick, no traffic, just a single red bus, parked in the middle of the span, the 65. Its lights were on. The doors were open. I boarded. The driver didn't look up. I didn't ask where we were going. The doors hissed shut behind me. The air changed, heavy, viscous, like I'd stepped underwater. My ears popped. My chest tightened. The glass refused to show me the world. As I tried to gaze out onto the streets, we moved. My eyes warped out onto the darkness surrounding me, and I tried to recognize the street. People walked backwards on the pavement, heads twitching every few seconds as though catching whispers from nowhere. A child pointed at me from the corner. Their hand had too many fingers. A dog barked, and the sound came out hours later, long after the dog had gone. I closed my eyes for a second. When I opened them, I was home. The 65 vanished into the darkness behind me, not down the road, but into it, like the tarmac folded open and swallowed it whole. That was nearly 2 years ago. I tell people I'm fine. I go to work. I see friends. But something's off. The sky is too low some days, like it's pressing down on my head. My girlfriend doesn't sleep anymore. She just lies there, eyes open, whispering a language I don't know. She says we never went to Edinburgh. She says we've never left London. We never lived together before that night. Photos in my house keep changing. Not dramatically. Just a shadow moved here. A hand where there wasn't one before. The Shaftesbury's gone. Boarded up. No one remembers it. The sign now says, closed for maintenance since 1965. At night, it calls, not loudly, but low and rhythmic. The river. It sounds like breath. Sometimes I see figures walking just beneath the surface, heads tilted, mouths open wide. I avoid the towpath. But the 65? It doesn't care. I've moved house, moved to the other side of London, but I don't dream. Because when I do, I'm back on that bus. I wake with bruises on my shoulders, handprints on my arms. My phone has pictures I didn't take. The journeys we take draw it closer to me. Tonight, as I write this down, I dreamt that it pulled up outside my new home. I heard the engine purring, low and hungry, like it was just behind my window. The walls are thinner than they should be. The 65 never left me, and I will never leave it. Story 7. The July 18th Incident. Special Dead Final Draft. July 18th, 2025. Something terrible happened the other day. Not that you'd know it if you weren't watching the local morning news. At first, everything was normal. A segment about a Shiba Inu that could surf. It was so cute it broke the anchorman's masculine bravado, driving him to tears. A weather girl cracking jokes about an incoming heat wave. Then boom, it cut to a breaking news. Screen. A different anchor appeared on screen. She looked directly into the camera, her professional mask already slipping, like she couldn't believe what she was about to read. We interrupt your scheduled broadcast with breaking news out of upstate New York, she said, voice soft and strained. We just received disturbing footage related to what officials are calling an act of unspeakable horror. She paused, visibly shaken. The event occurred this morning at the redacted Avenue School for Autism, a secure educational facility for children with high support needs. The video you're about to see has not been edited, but we feel the public has a right to see what happened. The footage that followed was unlike anything anyone expected. It began shaky, a cell phone being placed down. Too bright, too personal. A young white man, early 30s, stared into the lens with a look between nervous and exhausted. He wore a laminated badge on a blue lanyard. A smile showed he loved working with kids, even if this population wasn't always easy to work with. "Hey guys," he said, forcing a smile for the camera. "I'm Mr. Judas, and this is our first day in the life TikTok." The principal wanted us to show the world that kids with autism are regular kids, and they're more than just a locked building full of forgotten kids. That was literally what he said. God, he's such a pain. He cleared his throat. "So, here we go." He looked proud to be at his job, even if his eyes told another story. Too many people said he was doing God's work, though they couldn't handle a single meltdown or bite from these kids. He turned the camera toward a classroom. Small, painted in loud, cheerful colors and decorated with cute things. Posters behind him reminded staff to keep their phones packed away. Ironic, considering this was filmed on a phone. For children sat around a round table, a thin black girl giggling as a tall white male aide tickled her arms. A Pakistani boy clinging tightly to an older woman's waist, face buried in her stomach. A tiny Hispanic girl, her hands darting across an iPad screen, giggling at images only she could see. A chubby Hispanic boy beside her, silent and locked into his own screen. He pointed at the kids. "That's Layton. She's our little track star." His voice was proud, even if it felt like coded language. "Most likely an eloper. That's Ollie, our little lover boy." He laughed as Ollie tried to kiss the aide's arm. "This is Valeria. Scientists actually believe she's where giggles originate from," he joked. Valeria giggled in response. "And this is Angel. He's a new transfer, but he's great so far. Say hi, guys." Valeria tapped a button. A robotic voice replied, "Hi." She waved and giggled. Ollie didn't respond, clinging harder to the aide. The camera shifted. Behind the kids, past the activity boards and felt charts, was a smart board showing morning meeting. It then shifts to video about feelings played with swirling dots as the kids dance along. In the background, a walkie-talkie beeped softly, muffled beneath the song. You could just barely hear the words. "Support, room, biting." Next to the board was a large, wall-length window looking out onto a small, walled-in garden. The pale blue sky shone. The sun oppressed the earth as a bird flew by. But that's when it started. Instead of kids watering the grass or planting vegetables, 3 staff members in black padded uniforms restrained a thrashing student. Their feet thrashed as the child tried to grab at the staff. The child looked sick, skin bluish-gray, especially around the lips. He got more violent as it began to bite the staff's padded arms. The boy's jaw began snapping open and shut violently as he thrashed, teeth gnashing at anyone who got too close. A female with dark black hair held his arm in a restraining hold, whispering something inaudible through the walls. As they tried to hold him in a supine, no one spoke about what was happening outside. The teacher just kept filming his work with the kids. The footage glitched briefly, pink and green as it transitioned back to the classroom. The same room, calmer. Layton twirled her dreads, mumbling Peppa Pig lines to herself. The teacher knelt beside her with a flashcard book and pencil. "Okay, Layton," he spoke gently. "Work first, then iPad." She giggled but ignored him for a moment. When he sat down next to her, her eyes lit up. "Okay, Layton, touch nose." Her slender finger poked his nose as they giggled. "Layton, you silly goose. Touch your nose." Out of context, a cute bonding moment, but they were both unaware of the student outside, devouring the arm of the smaller woman. Her arm guards couldn't block whatever fangs were inside the kid. Cut to the news anchor. Her face blotchy, makeup ruined, full of dread. We have no clue if the teacher heard the commotion or noticed, or if he was too focused on his students. "I, for one, am horrified." She sniffled. "There is one more video filmed during this incident." She stammered, terrified to continue. Another video loaded. The teacher high-fived Layton when an alarm blared. "This is not an emergency. Please go into lockdown procedures." A male voice boomed over the speakers. "Nella, please get Layton and Ollie and bring them to the safety corner." The teacher stayed calm, walked off camera. A loud lock clicked. A few seconds later, He returned with Valeria and Angel in his hands, their eyes glued to their iPads. They stayed in the corner. "Okay," Mr. Redacted said, reaching to turn off the phone. The feed cut. The anchor returned. "If you or a loved one is faint of heart, please leave the room." She was clearly off script. This next scene, it's too much for anyone to handle. Her voice trembled as the footage resumed. The camera was off as the teacher went to the kids. Suddenly, bang, a loud slam rattled the tempered glass. The child being held down was banging on the glass. The teacher froze, slowly turned toward the window. "Nella," he said calmly, trying to control the classroom. She nodded and stood closer to Ollie and Leighton. He and another aide stayed close to Angel and Valeria. The child banged one last time on the glass, making a small crack. The anchor's voice cut through the tension. "It learns." The boy's hands banged against the crack, making it bigger. One staff member lay slumped by a flower bed, arm bent backward unnaturally. Two others barely moved. The boy, if it could still be called that, pressed against the glass. Massive, 5 feet 10 inches, bloated like he'd eaten too much. His eyes, wide and colorless, ravenous. The teacher grabbed Angel as aides hurried the other kids toward the door. Then it happened. A hand went through the glass, shattering it like a bomb had gone off. The child flew through headfirst, landing on all fours. His mouth was open wider than humanly possible, red, wet, feral. The phone fell, cracking the lens but still recording. The teachers and aides scrambled to protect the students. The news anchor shrieked. "You can see him. He's pushing the child through the door." "Holy shit," she screamed, incensored. "Run," the teacher commanded as he tried to close the door but was pushed against it. The boy bit into his arm. "Fuck," he growls as he pushed the boy off and grabbed an iPad to give him something to bite. The robotic "hi" repeated with every bite. As he approached the teacher again, his gray hands reaching forward to grab the teacher. The anchor sat frozen, fear etched into her face. Eyes wide, unblinking, pale in the studio lights. After minutes, she finally spoke. What we witnessed was a tragedy. Our team was unwilling to show the rest of the footage. She shakenly shuddered. But body cam footage from that day leaked on YouTube. It wasn't cleared by legal or edited. It's our duty to show it. Her voice trembled with fear. The terrifying scene and the possibility it could happen to anyone. The screen changed. First person view from a body cam. Timestamp July 18th, 2025, 9:35 a.m. A gun was visible. A group of officers at a locked door. His gloved hands press a button next to a comm system. "NYPD," the officer shouted. Muffled screams from behind the locked door. "It's locked!" The officer next to him calls out the obvious. "No time to request entry," the body-cammed officer replied, as the officer next to him prepares his gun. "Breach it," he gives the authority. Shots rang out. The door crashed open as the officers give a mighty kick. The officers rush in quickly. Dim halls, empty. No kids laughing. No learning. One officer gagged at the smell of death. A banner with the school's name stained with blood. As Peppa Pig and Minecraft Steve's blood covered images greet them on the banner. A scream echoed, not human. They turned left quickly, following the sound. Their footsteps rushed as they unfortunately found it. The boy, or what he had become. His body even more bloated and more gray. His lips ripped open, and K9S on display's face bared into someone. Behind him, Angel's body. His face hidden, hand in his mouth as if hiding a scream. His other arm ripped off. His iPad lay beneath him. The screen cracked and bloody. What happened next shocked him to the core. The officer stepped forward, seeing what the bot was doing. The boy, tall and gray, covered in blood, had buried his head into Leighton's torso, chomping, growling like a predator fighting off anyone trying to eat its meal. She lay twitching, breath ragged in unimaginable pain. Every bite from the boy makes Leighton's body twitching more. Officers aimed their guns. Another sound came from the right. The body cam swung to show the female support staff, the one who held the boy earlier, now gray like him. Her black hair dripped red. her uniform soaked in viscera to cover the Union number. She tore apart an aide as she saw Nella's weakened body. Nella, once valiant, was dragged into the carnage. A small child's shoe lay beside her. An officer, hardened by horrors, looked scared, his face stoic, but eyes full of dread. He whispered a prayer. "Jesus," he muttered as they rushed past the abandoned security desk. Walls once clean with student images were now blood-covered and red. They arrived at the deep scene. "Freeze!" An officer shouted at the gray boy. No response. The boy bit into Leighton. The officers aimed. The boy looked right again. The camera followed. The support staff, protectors of children, were now the attackers. The female staff who once restrained him rose, face gray and bloated after eating Nella, her mouth unhinged, preparing to lunge. The body fell twitching. The shaking body cam showed one bright spot, an officer holding Valeria's hand, rushing her out. Support staff rushed the downed officer. The feed cut out. An apology message from ABC News followed. No official explanation was ever given. The school remains closed indefinitely. Story 8. I don't know what they'll look like, but they're coming to find you. Keep your cool. Don't react. They're searching for people who react. What am I even looking at here? I whispered, gaze fixed on a truck that had just pulled up beside me. It was 3:53 in the morning. Main Street was appropriately deserted. Not a single other vehicle in sight. The front of the truck wasn't what left me slack-jawed. It what was trailing behind the engine. My eyes traced the outline of a giant rectangular container made of transparent glass. It was like a shark tank, except it had a red curtain draped against the inside of the wall that was facing me. Multiple human-shaped shadows flickered behind the curtain, pacing up and down the length of the 18-wheeler, like a group of anxiety-riddled stagehands preparing for Act 1 of play. Icy sweat beaded on my forehead. I cranked the AIC to its highest setting. The stoplight's hazy red glow reflected off my windshield. My foot hovered over the gas, and I nearly ran the light when something in my peripheral vision caused me to freeze. They had pulled back the curtain. My breath came out in ragged gasps. Hot acid leapt up the back of my throat. Judging by what was inside, that box was no shark tank. A shining steel table, honeycombed overhead lights like monstrous bug eyes, drills, scalpels, monitors with video feeds, displaying the table from every conceivable angle. A flock of nurses, sporting sterile gowns and powdered gloves. It only got worse once I saw the surgeon. He was impossibly tall, hunching slightly forward to prevent his head from grazing the top of the hollow container, as if to further delineate his rank. His smock was leathery and skin-toned. Everyone else's was white and cleanly pressed. Between the mask covering his mouth and the glare from the light affixed to his glasses, I couldn't see his face. He lumbered toward the table, fingers wrapped around the handles of a wheelchair. The person in the wheelchair was unconscious. A young man with a mop of frizzy brown hair, naked and pale. His head was deadweight, rolling across his chest as the wheelchair creaked forward, inch by tortuous inch. Despite his ragdoll body, I knew he was awake. Even though I couldn't see them, I knew there was life behind his eyes. He just couldn't move his body. The truck creaked forwards. I didn't even notice that the light had turned green. There was no one behind me, so I put my car in park and watched them drive away. Before long, they had disappeared into the night. A wave of relief swept down my spine, but an intrusive thought soured the respite. By now, they're likely operating on him. He can feel everything. The ripping of skin, the oozing of blood. His nerves are screaming. He just can't say anything. Exactly like it was for me. "I'm sorry, Pete. Run that by me again? What was so wrong with the truck?" James asked, rubbing his temple like he had a migraine coming on. I tore off a sheet from a nearby paper towel roll and reached over our kitchen island. "You're dripping again, bud," I remarked. James cocked his head at me, then looked at the wipe. He couldn't feel the mucus dripping from the corner of his right eye, a side effect from the LASIK procedure that he had undergone a month prior. Undeniably, he looked better without glasses. That said, If attention from the opposite sex was the name of the game, the persistent goopy discharge that he now suffered from seemed like a bit of monkey's paw. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Recognition flashed across his face. Oh, shoot. He grabbed a paper towel and blotted away the gelatinous teardrop. As he crumpled it up, I tried explaining what had happened the night before. For the 3rd time, I'm driving home from a shift, idling at a stoplight, and this truck pulls up beside me. One of those big motherfuckers. Cargo hold the size of our apartment. Monster truck wheels. You get the idea. But the cargo hold is a huge glass box. There was a curtain on the inside, like they were about to debut a mobile rendition of Hamlet. But the people inside of the box, I forgot to mention the people, they weren't about to perform a play. I mean, I don't know for sure that they weren't, but that's beside the point. They looked like they were going to, and I know how this sounds, but they looked like they were going to perform surgery. My recollection of the event crumbled. I was losing the plot. Now, both of his eyes were leaking. I ripped another piece off the roll and handed it to him. He was watching me, but James's expression was vacant. The lights were on, but nobody seemed to be home. I wondered if he'd discontinued his ADHD meds or something. After an uncomfortable pause, he realized why I was giving him more tissue paper. Thanks. So, what was so wrong with the truck? He repeated. About a week passed before I saw it again. That time, it was all happening in broad daylight. I rounded a corner onto Main Street and parked my car in front of our local coffee shop, pining for a bolus of caffeine to prepare for another grueling night shift. As I placed my hand over the cafe's doorknob, I heard a familiar jingling noise from behind me, the rattling of change against the inside of a plastic cup. A pang of guilt curled around my heart, like a hungry python. I'd walked past Danny like he didn't even exist. I flipped around, digging through my scrub pockets for a few loose bills. Sorry about that, Bud. Can't seem to find a way out of my own head today. Danny smiled, revealing a mouth filled with perfect white teeth. I'd known him for as long as I'd lived in town. Didn't know much about him, though I wasn't aware of why he was homeless, nor was I clued into why he never spoke. Say what you want about Danny, but it's hard to deny that the man was a curiosity. He didn't fit nicely into any particular archetype, I suppose. His beard was wild and unkempt, but the odd camo-colored jumpsuits he sported never smelled too bad. He was mute, but he didn't appear to have any other severe health issues. No obvious ones. Anyway, he was a man of inherent contradictions, silently loitering on the bench in front of the cafe, day in and day out. I liked him. There was something hopeful about his existence. Gave him what I had to spare when I went for coffee most days. As I dropped the crumpled $5 bill into his cup, I saw it. The truck was moving about 15 miles an hour, but that did not seem to bother them. The surgeon didn't struggle to keep his balance as he toiled away on his patient. The table and the tools and the crash cart didn't shift around from the momentum. Oh my God, I whimpered. It was difficult to determine exactly what procedure they were performing. The monitors in their video feeds were pointed toward the operation, yes, but they were so zoomed in that it was nearly impossible to orient myself to what I was seeing. An incomprehensible mess of gleaming viscera, soggy, red, and pulsing. Best guess? They were rooting around in someone's abdomen. Now, I'm a pretty reserved person. My ex-wife described me as conflict-avoiding to our marriage counselor, but the raw surprise of seeing that truck and the accompanying gore broke my normal pattern of behavior, really lit a fire under my ass. Hey, what the hell do you all think you're doing? There's an elementary school a block over. For Christ's sake, I shouted, jogging after the truck, with its hazard lights flashing. The vehicle started to pull over to the side of the road. I had almost caught up to it when I heard the pounding of fast, heavy footsteps behind me. Danny wrapped his arm around my shoulders, slowed me down, and began speaking. His voice was low and raspy, like his vocal cord were fighting to make a sound through thick layers of rust. He didn't really say anything, either, or, more accurately, what he said had no meaning. Well, yes, and you see that. I realize now that Danny wasn't talking to relay a message. No, he was just pretending to be embroiled in conversation. and he wanted me to play along. When I tried to turn my head back to the truck, he forcefully pushed my cheek with the fingers of the arm he had around my shoulder, so I'd be facing him. I was still fuming about the gruesome display, aiming to give the perpetrators a piece of my mind. But the entire sequence of events was so disarmingly strange that my brain just ended up short-circuiting. I walked alongside him until we reached the nearest alleyway. He started turning it, so I did as well. I caught a glimpse of the truck as we pivoted. They were no longer operating. Instead, they were all clustered in the corner, staring intently at us, the surgeon skin-toned smock and gaunt body towering above the group. Slowly, it rolled past the alleyway. As soon as we were out of view, Danny dropped the act. He doubled over, hyperventilating, hand pushed into the brick wall of the adjacent building to keep him from falling over completely. What the fuck is going on? I whispered. The man's breathing began to regulate, and my voice grew louder. What the hell kind of surgery are they doing in there? I shouted. Danny shot up and put a finger to his lips to shush me. I acquiesced. Once it was clear that I wasn't going to start yelling again, he pulled a $5 bill I'd just given him from one pocket and a cheap ballpoint pen from the other. The man rolled the bill against the brick wall and furiously scribbled a message. He then folded it neatly, placed it on his palm, and offered it to me. Reluctantly, I took the money back. He muttered the word sorry, and then ran further into the alleyway. That time, I didn't follow his lead. Instead, I uncrumpled the bill. In his erratic handwriting, Danny conveyed a series of fragmented warnings. It looks different for everyone. If you react, they can tell you're uninhabited. If they can tell you're uninhabited, that's when they take you. They chose brown for their larvae. Brown is the most common. You need to leave. You need to leave tonight. The next afternoon, I discovered Danny's usual bench concerningly unoccupied, but the truck was there, parked right outside the cafe. I heeded his advice. Some of his advice, at least. I pretended I couldn't see them. That said, it was nearly impossible to just pretend they weren't there once they began driving in circles around my neighborhood. Every night, I could faintly hear them. The whirring of drills and the truck's grumbling engine outside my bedroom window. They didn't just plant themselves right outside my front door. Thankfully, they still did their rounds, their patrol, but it felt like they'd taken a special interest in me. Maybe I was a unique case to them. Danny's intervention had put me in a nebulous middle ground. They weren't completely confident that I could see them. They weren't completely confident that I couldn't see them, either. Thus, they increased the pressure. Either I cracked or I wouldn't. I came pretty close. It wasn't just the sheer absurdity of it all that was getting to me. The stimuli felt targeted, catered to my very specific set of traumas. I suppose that probably yields the best results. To that end, have you ever heard of a condition called anesthesia awareness? It's the fancy name for the concept of maintaining consciousness during a surgery. All things considered, it's a fairly common phenomenon. One incident for every 15,000 operations or so. For most, it's only a blip, a fleeting lucidity, a quick flash of awareness, and then they're back under. For most, it's painless. Even without pain, it's still pretty terrifying. Paralytics are a devilish breed of pharmacology. They induce complete and utter muscular shutdown without affecting the brain's ability to think and perceive. Immurement within the confines of your own flesh. To me, there isn't a purer vision of hell. That said, I'm fairly biased, because I'm not like most. I was awake for the entirety of appendectomy, and I felt every single thing. Sure, they saved my life. My appendix detonated like a grenade inside my abdominal cavity. But I mean, at what cost? The first incision was the worst. I won't bother describing the pain. The sensation was immeasurable, completely off the scale, and I couldn't do a goddamn thing about it. They dug around in my torso for nearly 2 hours, exhuming the infected appendix and cleaning up the damage it had already done, cauterizing my bleeding intestines. About halfway through, I even managed to kick my foot. Just once, and it wasn't much. It had taken nuclear levels of energy and willpower to manifest that tiny movement through the effects of the paralytic. A nurse mentioned the kick to the surgeon. Want to know what he said in response? Noted. I've been hoping the truck would give up at some point and just move on. It wasn't a great plan, but I didn't exactly have the money to skip town and start a life somewhere else. When I stopped by the coffee shop this afternoon, the truck was there for my new normal. I considered completely altering my routine to avoid them, but if the safest thing was to pretend they weren't there, wouldn't that be suspicious? I was walking out with my drink, doing my absolute damnedest to act casual, but then I saw who was on the operating table today. It may not have actually been him, of course. It could have just been an escalation on their part, a sharper piece of stimuli in order to elicit a reaction from me finally. To their credit, witnessing Danny being cut into did make me scream. When I got back to my sedan, I didn't head to work. I returned home to retrieve a couple of necessities, primarily family photos and my revolver. Wanted to say goodbye to James as well. Turns out he wasn't expecting me home so soon. I threw open the front door of our apartment. It was pitch black inside. All the lights were off. The window blinds must have been pulled down as well. My hand slinked across the wall, searching for the light switch. I flicked it on, and there he was, propped up on the couch, head resting limply on his shoulder. There were trails of mucus across his cheeks. I followed them up to where his eyes should have been, but they were gone, and there was no blood anywhere. I heard a deep gurgling sound. I assumed it was coming from James, but his lips weren't moving. Then, something crept over the top of the couch. Honestly, it resembled an oversized caterpillar. Pale, segmented, scrunching its body as it moved, but it was as big as a sausage link. Its tail was distinctive, tapering off like a wasp's belly until the very end, at which point it abruptly expanded and became spherical. If you viewed the tail head-on, it bore an uncanny resemblance to an eyeball with a hazel-colored iris. Initially, it crawled back into James. The bulbous tail squished and contorted within the socket. When it settled, the facade truly was convincing. It looked like his eye. Then James blinked. I turned and sprinted down the hallway, left without grabbing a single thing. Danny called them larvae. I suppose that's a good fit. Maybe that's why the ones inhabiting James didn't rat me out. Maybe they need to mature before they're capable of communicating with other members of their species, whatever that entails. I don't know many people are already inhabited. For those among you who aren't, be wary of the horrific. Be cautious of things that appear out of place. It might not be what I experienced, but according to Danny, it'll be designed to get your attention. Somehow, they'll know exactly what will pull your strings. I promise. Your best bet? Don't respond. Pretend it's not there. In fact, try to act like my body on the operating table. Conscious but paralyzed. No matter how terrible it is, no matter painful it feels, no matter how loudly your mind screams for you to intervene, just don't react. Story 9. Premature burial. Grave robbing is not a glamorous act. To wrest away any valuables attached to a corpse is by all means depraved, not to mention the horror brought upon a family who discovers their loved one's final resting place has been desecrated. It's safe to say the ethics of performing such a thing are dubious at best. Then again, what use do the dead have for jewelry and keepsakes? Wouldn't their utility be far greater on the living? And especially for those who are in need of money? That was how I justified it for the longest time. I thought that if anything, it was selfish of those families to waste such valuables on glorified fertilizer rather than giving back to their community. I look back on such thoughts with contempt. Even if I can understand that desperation can bring cruelty out of the most golden hearts. Cruel acts seem so reasonable when we're the ones doing them. The reason I stopped was not related to a reevaluation of my morals or some grand epiphany. I was very much the same person before and after in terms of my values. At least for a while, it was by pure chance that I stopped. One singular event spurred the end of my illicit activities. Winning the bad lottery, so to speak. I want to preface by saying that although I may not be brave, I am rarely frightened. Hanging around corpses long enough tends to desensitize you. When I say I was rattled to my core, I really do mean it. It will always amaze me how much can change in one night. It was not an unusual job. Some rich family's son, had supposedly died in his sleep. I don't remember the details exactly, but it was chalked up to a condition of the heart. Whatever the case, the likelihood of him being buried with jewelry was high given the family owned a company which sold rings and necklaces. They were also the type to flaunt their wealth. Although the business of grave robbing tends to rely on assumptions, even one particularly valuable ring can ensure that you don't have to work for years. In my young mind, it was worth the risk and uncertainty. I had scored before, so I had no reason to give up for a more ethical profession, if you can even call it a profession. This was a time where security cameras were not as widespread as they are now, so I often acted recklessly. Normally I wouldn't go for such a fresh grave, but I really needed the money if the guy was indeed buried with something valuable. It was slightly past midnight by the time I got to the cemetery. I remember thinking it to be odd that the family had him buried in some random cemetery instead of their family plot, but brushed it off. It didn't matter much to me at the time. In fact, it made my job a whole lot easier, as breaking into a rich family's plot would be far more risky. Some of those places have actual security. I already knew where the grave was courtesy of a visit I made in the daylight. I learned over time that scoping out the place beforehand can do wonders, as having to locate a grave in the dark is infuriating. Constantly scanning over names like I was in the good, the bad, and the ugly was a mistake I only made once. There were stars visible above me as I trudged through the muddy ground towards the back of the cemetery. They would be the only witnesses to the sinful act I was about to take part in. By the time I reached the grave, I was exhausted. I hefted the shovel over my right shoulder and took a moment to breathe. It struck me in that instant just how quiet the place was. I know full well that the dead tell no tales, but not even the insects made their presence known. To say it was eerie would be an understatement. A certain dread gripped me as I soberly realized that I will find a place underneath the ground someday. It could very easily be me in one of those boxes, hidden away from sunlight and starlight. There's a certain cruelty in the fact that the dead are banished to an eternity in darkness after bearing through the pains life has to offer. What if our consciousness stayed stuck in our body after death, forever doomed to languish in a coffin's confines? I grimaced at that thought, then pierced the shovel's head through the earth's soft skin, making my entrance wound. The digging was always the worst part. The monotony and strain for only a chance at a reward. It was like playing the lottery sometimes. There was of course the aftermath. 2. Even the most hardened individual may feel at least a little guilt when they unearth someone's loved one for nothing. In such cases, my usual justifications wouldn't work. I was simply traumatizing people's families. When you dig, you have time to think. Each shovel strike was another opportunity for a pang of guilt to encircle my mind. The only relief comes when the shovel hits against wood. Then the excitement comes in. The excitement of what you might find, and the dread of there being nothing of note. As I cracked open the coffin, another feeling entirely gripped me. It started with a pit in my stomach as the smell wafted out of the opening. I had to turn my head to the side to vomit. Yellowish bile bubbling against and staining the dirt. It smelled of piss. It smelled of shit. Worst of all, it smelled of fresh death. Hunters may be familiar with that stench, especially when approaching the corpse of a recent kill. There's nothing like it. Once my revulsion subsided, I opted to plug my nose as I got closer to the open coffin. I wanted to take a closer look. Something was very wrong, and somebody clearly hadn't done their job properly. Hell, the family was rich enough that they had their own mortician. So what the fuck had happened? I was overcome with horror as I shined a flashlight onto the body. It was the eyes. They were milky and wide open. His face was contorted in the sort of terror I had never seen on another human being. His chin was encrusted with old vomit. I had to turn away. I was in denial. He had to have been dead when they buried him. Stuff like that just doesn't happen. I was going to close that coffin, fill the grave to the best of my ability, and leave. I should have just run then and there. But no, I just had to clean up the scene. The truth became clear to me when I went and put the lid back on the coffin, as I spared one last look. There were broken fingernails, stained with blood that now looked brown. After that, the scratch marks on the inside of the lid hardly registered to me. I've thought about the incident a lot ever since I cleaned up my life. It just made no sense to me how such an oversight could occur, even with the more limited technology of the 80s. People being buried alive was meant to be a thing of the far past, with such a wealthy family. How could such a thing have occurred? Did they even view the body before consigning it to ground? A certain conclusion came to me after giving it enough thought. What happened to that boy was deliberate, and his own family saw to it that he was buried that way. I can never know the why. I don't see how else it could have occurred. It's so hard to believe that there is good in the world now. To know that I added to the bad haunts my dreams. Sometimes I wake up in a cold sweat. I have nightmares where instead of the stars in the sky, I see nothing but hardwood above me. People walk over me without ever knowing I'm there. I scream, but the blanket of dirt is louder. As the air thins, I scratch against my enclosure with abandon. My fingernails chip and peel before one comes off entirely. I always wake up after that, but I fear one day I won't be so lucky. Living or dead, my body will find its way to a box eventually. It is that which scares me more than anything, to be entombed in the dirt of the earth, so uncaring to those who inhabit it. Story 10. I'm a lifeguard at a public pool deep in the heart of a strange forest. I protect people from more than just drowning. Okay, here's how you get there. Take Highway 101 down past Beaver until you see the hand-painted sign that says Charis. Ignore the snaggle-toothed man in overalls standing next to it. Do not, under any circumstances, buy anything he's selling. They're not cherries. Make a left on the road underneath the sign. If you can't see it at first, that's fine. It won't look like a road until you're on it. Take that path till it turns to gravel, then hang the third left. Ignore your phone when it tells you to turn back. Don't bother putting it on mute. That never works. Stay on that track till it turns to dirt and make the fifth right. Be careful not to take the fourth right. The house at the end of that road is definitely owned by an axe murderer. Old shack in the middle of nowhere. Ivy and spiderwebs all over the roof and eaves. They've been after him for years. There's just never been enough evidence to convict. For the rest of the way, keep your windows rolled up and ignore the voices that sound like your loved ones. Try not to look out the side windows too, or else you might see them peeking in at you. Don't stop to give anyone a ride, no matter how much they ask. Stay the course. Ignore how thick the trees are becoming. And then you'll be there. Mirror Forest Pool. You won't miss it. I'm not talking about some hidden mountain lake. I'm talking pool. A paved parking, sunscreen-saturated public pool. I'm Luke the lifeguard. I work at the pool. Technically, this public amenity where I am employed is part of the local national park, but it's not connected to any cabin system, hotel, or campground in the area. In fact, it's miles away from any sort of humanity at all. If you saw it, you would think it looks like any other everyday, average, middle-class outdoor community pool, except for the fact it's in the middle of the goddamn wilderness. Even though it's outdoors, it's open all year round. As a kid, my parents would take me in the winter as a treat. We were poor and couldn't afford much. At the pool, it could be snowing just outside the fence, but inside the property always felt like a toasty 80-degree day. At the time, I just thought they had real good space heaters. The pool itself has 3 sections, a shallow end, a deep end, and a middle connector. Sometimes the shallow and deep end switch places. We always take a few minutes to check which end is which when we open. That way, we can close the slide and diving board until they switch back. A lifeguard forgot to do that one time. An old guy broke his neck when he dove off the diving board into a shallow foot of water. His wife tried to sue, but it was hard to explain to the judge the whole deep to shallow situation. I think she ended up dropping the case. 2 sides of the pool are surrounded by an L-shaped building. The other 2 sides are covered by a chain link fence. In the L building are 2 locker rooms, a front desk and office, and a boiler room that's locked at all times. No one is allowed inside, even though that's where the chemical works are. Rick, my co-worker, thinks it's because something lives in there. His money is on the safety inspector. I don't know about that. Last week I did see a set of eyes peeking out the ventilation slats at me. Might have been a trick of the light, but I swear it had glowing red pupils. Stan, our safety man, has eyes that are a nice hazel. If the pH ever does get out of whack, we just run the hose until it hits a toasty 7 on our little tester vial. Outside the pool, there's a small playground outside for dry fun. At least, that's what it says on the brochure. What the brochure doesn't advertise is that if you go into the crawly tube between the structures, you'll hear a little kid voice ask, "Can you find me?" and then start counting down from 30. Most people leave the park at that point, but one of my other co-workers, Vince, stayed until the end of the countdown. Wanted to do an experiment. The police found his body parts shoved into the hollow support tubes 3 days later. Never did find his head. That happened about a month ago. The boss said construction crews were too expensive, so we just had to clean things out as best we could. The park was ready for action a week later. We did put caution tape up on the crawly tube though, just in case. And I'm happy to report there haven't been any more incidents. Well, in the park at least. You would think with all that weirdness going on we would be struggling to make ends meet, but we always seem to have steady business. We're cheap, ain't no way else to say it. We pass out a lot of free swim coupons at the Fred Meyers. I guess people are desperate for any kind of affordable pool, even ones in the middle of nowhere. This summer, we got the usual crowds. Teenagers, stay-at-home moms, kids hyped up on their first snort of summer vacation. We also got some less ordinary people as well. There was this one guy. He would always show up Thursdays, 12 p.m. on the dot. He was real thin and kind of lanky. He had a huge smile and freaky white eyes. He'd pay his $4.50 admission and go into the locker room. 10 minutes later, he'd be out on the pool deck. He'd circle the water's edge 2 times. He'd go real slow, making eye contact with any patron that would look back. Sometimes he waved at the kids. I don't think I ever saw him blink. After his circling, he'd get in line for the diving board. When it was his turn, he'd jump once, twice, 3 times. He'd turn head over heels in the air and dive in with hardly a splash. And then he'd never come back up. For the rest of the day, he would just lay on the bottom of the pool, motionless. First time I saw him like that, I freaked out, almost jumped in and everything. But luckily Rick stopped me before I made a scene. He does that all the time, he told me later in the break room. He'll be back next week. I wasn't so sure. His body stayed at the bottom of the pool for the rest of the day. When we closed up the front desk and ran the pool covers, I could still see him, slowly drifting into the middle of the deep end. His eyes were open and he still had that big, toothy smile. It reminded me of a shark. When I came to open the next morning, he had vanished. Next Thursday, he was back at the front desk again, ready to pay admission. I don't know what the patrons thought, but none of the regulars batted an eye at it. Occasionally you get a newcomer who'd nervously point out the body at the bottom of the pool, but we just stick to protocol. Inform them everything's fine, and repeat Rule 7 to them. Rule 7. Do not talk or interact in any way with a Thursday diver. Believe it or not, Rule 7's pretty important. Just last week we had an Olympic swimmer from out of state come in and see the Thursday diver's whole routine. Rick and I didn't see what happened next. So the best we can guess is that Mr. Olympic thought Mr. Thursday needed a rescue and dove in. What we do know for sure is that around 1 p.m. we were pulling the Olympic guy off the bottom of the pool. He drowned, go figure. While we were down there, we had to be careful not to brush up against the Thursday diver. His hand was gripping the Olympic swimmer's ankle. It was a bit of a tug of war to get him loose. When we finally got the foot away, the Thursday diver didn't do anything. He just kept peacefully drifting in the deep end, eyes still wide open and mouth still smiling. Most pools get away with having one rule sign. Ours takes up 2 entire walls. It also has an asterisk at the end informing the public that if they want a full list, they'll need to visit the front desk for the binder. I'm not sure why anyone would want to swim in such a strict pool, but I guess that's why our admission is so cheap. There's a lot of other weird rules in the binder, like making sure the locker rooms are locked from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. every Sunday to avoid escapees. And after every 5th person uses a slide, we need to send down a bag of sand. I learned my lesson the hard way with that last one. I was 3 weeks and manning the slide, and the fifth kid had just gone down. I was getting the bag of sand ready when the sixth kid pushed past me and raced up the steps. I tried to tell him to stop, but he just stuck his tongue out at me and threw himself into the entrance. He never came out the other side. There was a full investigation into his disappearance, but there weren't any charges. There was no evidence we had kidnapped him or done anything else. After all, there was no body, no blood. It was like the kid had just ceased to exist. I think they found him a month later in the desert. He survived. Barely. The article I read claimed he kept babbling about some cosmic highway where he was trapped for 1,000 years. Apparently, his pupils and hair had also turned shock white. Not sure I believe the eye thing. It felt like the news people were just having fun with that whole situation. Our rule binder is bursting at the seams because the boss loves making new rules. It's basically half his job. He stays cooped up in his office, paying bills and coming up with pool guidelines. None of us ever see him leave his little room. He's always the first there and the last to leave. We even have a special intercom that he uses to communicate with us. He never opens the door. The pool could be burning, and I don't think he'd even peek his head out to see where the smoke's coming from. Take the 4th of July incident, for example. We were in the middle of the holiday weekend rush, and it was a doozy. The pool was packed to the gills with all sorts of people. Sunscreen was so thick in the air, opening your mouth would turn your tongue white. We were understaffed with only the 4 of us lifeguards, and it was a 3-guard rotation. I was barely keeping up with all the little kids throwing themselves into the deep end with the passion of suicide bombers. I finally got my 15, and you better believe I hauled ass to the break room. Think less a room and more a repurposed closet. I remember checking the time, 3:55 p.m. I turned on a fan, we don't have AC in there, and stood in front of it for a hot second to relax. The clock ticked to 3:56 p.m., and everything went quiet. Where there had been about 10,000 kids and adults screaming at the top of their lungs, there was immediate silence. I thought I had lost my hearing. I snapped my fingers a few times, and when my ears didn't seem to be the problem, I went outside to see what was going on. The pool was empty. The lifeguards were standing around blinking like they weren't sure what they were looking at. We combed the entire area over. The locker rooms, the park, even the cupboard on the front desk. Nothing. All our patrons had just vanished. We mentioned this to our boss, and he said, probably went home for the fireworks. It was stupid hot that day, so maybe it was just a hallucination, but Rick swore he saw what happened. According to him, everything slowed down and got real still. Then, one by one, everyone jumped into the pool and dunked their heads all at the same time. Then they just dissolved layer by layer like they were in acid. Skin, muscle, organs, bones, and nothing. I have my doubts about that story. Rick loves pulling legs, and none of the other guards saw what he did. What I will say is Rick had some dark circles under his eyes the entire next week. I don't think the poor guy was sleeping. Now don't get me wrong. Mirror Forest Pool is not a terrible place. It's an adequate pool as far as pools go. But on top of that, there's nostalgia here. It's like all the essence of summer is infused into the air itself. Each breath feels like a step back in time. I just graduated high school, but working here, I feel like I'm back in elementary school, throwing all my papers and cheering as I hear the school bell ringing for the last time. It's kinda addicting. When you get here, you'll understand what I mean. You got the directions. Feel free to stop by. We're open Monday through Sunday, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Tell the guy at the front desk that you know Luke, and he'll give you a 50% discount on admission. Make sure you remember what I said about the overall guy with the charis. That's important. And even if the voice of your own mother begs you for a ride on the road in, don't open that door unless you want to see your face up on the missing person board at Walmart. We lost Claire that way. As for me, I'll keep you all posted on any new rules.